It happens that there is a philosopher called Friedrich Hegel, whom I must confess I specifically detest. And I'm happy to share that profound feeling with a far greater man, Gauss. In 1800, Hegel published a thesis, if you please, proving that although the definition of planets had changed since the ancients, there still could only be, philosophically, 7 planets. Well, not only Gauss knew how to answer that, Shakespeare answered that long before. There is a marvelous passage in King Lear in which who else but the fool says to the king, the reason why the 7 stars are no more than 7 is a pretty reason. And the king wags sagely and says, because they are not 8. And the fool says, yes, indeed, thou wouldst make a good fool. And so did Hegel. Not until Newton turned this into a physical system that modern scientific method really begins. And we can see in this book actually where the stumbling blocks were. For instance, I'm convinced that it's because at section 12 on how does a sphere attract a particle that we see the immense mathematical difficulties that he had to overcome before he could publish. When Newton was challenged on such questions as, you haven't explained why gravity acts, you haven't explained how action at a distance could take place, or indeed you haven't explained why rays of light behave the way they do, he always answered in the same terms. I do not make hypotheses. It's said that science will dehumanize people and turn them into numbers. That's false, tragically false. Look for yourself. This is the concentration camp and crematorium at Auschwitz. This is where people were turned into numbers. Into this pond were flushed the ashes of some 4 million people. And that was not done by gas. It was done by arrogance. It was done by dogma. It was done by ignorance. When people believe that they have absolute knowledge with no test in reality, this is how they behave. This is what men do when they aspire to the knowledge of gods. Science is a very human form of knowledge. We are always at the brink of the known. We always feel forward for what is to be hoped. Every judgment in science stands on the edge of error and is personal. Science is a tribute to what we can know, although we are fallible. In the end, the words were said by Oliver Cromwell. I beseech you, in the bowels of Christ, think it possible you may be mistaken. I owe it as a scientist to my friend Leo Szilard. I owe it as a human being to the many members of my family who died here, to stand here as a survivor and a witness. We have to cure ourselves of the itch for absolute knowledge and power. We have to close the distance between the push-button order and the human act. We have to touch people.